Due to the heavy snow, I'm stranded. I'm out of gas and can't turn on the heater. This situation could put lives in danger. Who cares about the life of the others? Over the phone, President Johnson's loud voice resounds. It seems he has no intention of listening to me. Incompetent and late. You're fired. What? Fired? At that time, I was so preoccupied with my own problems that I didn't pay attention to my surroundings, completely forgetting about the beautiful woman I had helped, who was sitting next to me. After seeing off the woman who got into a pickup car, I finally managed to return to the office. President Johnson's anger has not subsided at all, and I was fired for neglecting my duties. There were many things I wanted to do at this company. I thought I had contributed in my own way. However, now that I've lost my job and income, I can't dwell on it forever. I started looking for a new job, focusing on companies in the same industry, using my experience and skills. On a whim, I applied to a rival company and got called for an interview. As I headed to the interview, I unexpectedly ran into someone. "Excuse me, are you?" "My name is Max, 28 years old. I work in sales at a bread manufacturing company. The company has been making bread locally for a long time and is a well-known small to medium enterprise in the area. Our strength lies in what's known as local bread, unique to our region. After graduating from a local college preparatory high school, I went to a culinary school to learn all about baking. Since I was little, I loved eating, especially bread. Near my parents' house, there was a quaint old bakery run by an elderly couple. With both parents working, our house was always stocked with various types of bread, like loaf bread, savory bread, and sweet bread, for when I got hungry. My favorite was the crisp and satisfying cuisine amen, even more than any meal. I also loved the simple taste of gâteau noir, a traditional European pastry. Being an only child, there were times I felt lonely when my parents came home late, but bread was what comforted me. Savoring bread with milk was another blissful time for me. "Ah, good bread today. I'll have an egg roll for breakfast. Casual clothes tonight, perhaps gâteau noir tomorrow." Shopping for our regular supply of bread was mainly my mother's responsibility. She considered my preferences and consistently purchased a balanced mix of bread for immediate consumption and longer shelf life. Checking expiration dates and planning the order in which to eat the bread was also one of my pleasures. In high school, lunch was a choice between a home-cooked meal or bread from the school cafeteria. The simple school cafeteria bread was only available on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. I remember asking my mom to give me some pocket money on these days so I could buy bread. She insisted on eating a school lunch, even though they often only served pasta and meatballs, because she was worried about nutritional balance. Looking back, preparing lunch every day before work must have been quite a task for my mother, who worked full-time. Of course, I was grateful and enjoyed her homemade lunches, but I couldn't resist sharing school cafeteria bread with my friends for daily energy. "You really love bread, huh? Why don't you try baking it yourself? My cousin bakes her own bread. If you bring your bread to school, I'll taste it all." Even to others, my face must have looked happiest when eating bread. Teasing from a baseball club member who always shared his bread with me was a daily routine. "Baking bread is too much. I can cook a little, but baking requires buying all sorts of equipment." But these days, people are baking bread with much equipment. You might discover an incredible talent for baking. My classmates said it half-jokingly, but it made me want to try baking the bread I loved so much myself. On a whim, I shared my desire with my parents, and a week later, a large oven arrived at our house. They had seen me preparing meals and thought I might be able to bake bread. That weekend, I went to the supermarket with my parents to get ingredients. Using the internet as a guide, I put skim milk, bread flour, dry yeast, eggs, and butter into the cart. I was about to create my ideal bread. I still vividly remember the excitement I felt, unlike anything before. The first thing I made in middle school was a basic round bread. I started by mixing ingredients in a bowl, adding water gradually. When the dough started to come together, I took it out onto the table to knead, but it wasn't becoming smooth easily. On a hunch, I added butter. The fat spread through the dough, making the dry mixture smooth. When I slammed the dough onto the table a few times, I instinctively thought, it would turn out to be a delicious bread with a fragrant aroma. After letting the dough rise, I shaped it into small balls and baked them until golden brown in the oven. My first ever bread was a bit dry due to my inexperience, but it had a faint aroma of flour and butter. Not bad at all. In fact, not being able to make it perfect only fueled my passion for baking. Since that day, I would occupy the kitchen every weekend, buying ingredients from the supermarket and experimenting with different bread recipes. The bread I couldn't eat, I took to school to share with classmates and ask for their feedback on the taste. Gradually, I started thinking about making bread my career. Even though I attended what's called a college prep school, I expressed my wish to go to a culinary school to study baking. Max, are you determined to attend a culinary school? It's a viable option, but considering your academic abilities, you could aim for a decent university. If baking is your passion, there are university programs that also teach culinary arts. Perhaps consider graduating from university first and then deciding your next steps. A culinary school is a place to acquire cooking skills. If you change your mind after starting or find it's not what you expected or suited to you, it can lead to difficulties in job hunting. Considering such risks, my teacher suggested university, where a change of mind could still lead to various opportunities. I understand, but I'm set on attending culinary school. I'm passionate about learning the basics of baking and sharing delicious bread across the country. I won't waver in my decision. Though I can explain it, I know it's my calling when I bake. Please trust my choice. The teacher was surprised by my determination, but accepted my decision to go to culinary school. My parents reacted the same as my teacher. They had expected me to go to university. After much reassurance about my unwavering decision, they seemed to understand. While most of my classmates went to university, I enrolled in a school that offers comprehensive training in baking and pastries. After 3 years of learning the basics of bread making, I joined a bread manufacturing company. Although I wanted to train as a baker, I had my own ideas and dreams and chose to become a company employee. I'm Max, newly assigned to the sales department. With training from vocational school in baking and confectionery, I aim to maintain the company's beloved local bread taste while adding new flavors. Initially focusing on sales experience, my ultimate goal is to transition into product development. During my job search, I hope to work in product development at a bread manufacturing company. I was hired expecting involvement in product development, but due to staffing and the need for product knowledge, I ended up in sales. Though it wasn't my initial preference, I was satisfied with this assignment. The bread company I joined was a small to medium enterprise. Thus, departmental barriers were low, and employees flexibly handled multiple roles. I believed that by gaining experience in sales, I would quickly move into product development. Max, a graduate of a culinary school specializing in baking and pastries, will be an immediate asset. He will start by selling the new products I developed and learn as he goes. Introducing me was Johnson, the president of the company. When I first joined, he was still in his late 40s. President Johnson, leaving his job to take over his parents' small bakery, proved to be a skilled businessman, significantly expanding the company through enthusiastic sales efforts. He was more a man who loved being involved in the field than a typical executive, devoting his life to product planning and development. Local supermarkets were filled with unique yet nostalgic breads, many of which were developed by President Johnson through extensive trial and error. As a company built by the current president in a single generation, all decision-making power was concentrated in President Johnson's hands. The product development department, which I had hoped to join, existed in name but was largely ceremonial. The only staff member in this department was Jennifer, a powerful single mother raising a high school son and daughter while working. Although officially the department head, her only subordinate was a part-time employee. Jennifer was talented, but her opportunities to showcase her abilities were almost non-existent. President Johnson is passionate about bread and enjoys creating new products, making it difficult for him to delegate. While technically the head of product development, I have few bread creations to call my own. But Jennifer, you designed many breads at your previous company. With your experience, if you propose ideas, the president might adopt them. That's a bit doubtful. For the president, The breads this company makes are like his children. He's reluctant to let others intervene. Honestly, I want to delve deeper into bread making. Once my kids graduate from college and I have more freedom, I'll start looking for a new job. I had assumed some of the company's products were Jennifer's creations. However, her actual role was merely assisting the president in bread making, with no chance to implement her own ideas. I only learned this truth 6 months after joining. That makes me anxious. Despite opposition, I opted out of university to pursue bread making. I declined an offer from a large corporation, believing a smaller company would provide more freedom. Don't be so down. Just focus on the job at hand for now. Opportunities often come from unexpected places. Encouraged by Jennifer, I spent my days visiting local supermarkets and drugstores, pitching the president's new products, and jotting down my own ideas. About 5 years into my tenure, Jennifer confided in me. Just between us, I've begun job hunting. If successful, a position will become available in product development. While I can't discuss it openly, an old colleague from my previous job has launched their own business and invited me to join. I'm leaning towards accepting. A bakery. It's a cafe and bakery, a bit different. At my age, in my mid-40s, it's a significant pay cut, but I've chosen to prioritize doing what I love over worrying about the details. Max, since you've been working on product ideas too, why not present them to the president? She seemed concerned about my state, as I hadn't been able to pursue what I wanted. A proposal from someone young will surely please him, Jennifer said, looking into my eyes with conviction. But I'm already approaching my late 20s, not an age to leisurely wait for opportunities. President Johnson, considered a prodigy in the local bread industry, was rumored among employees to be struggling with new product development lately. Having launched over 100 types of bread, there were whispers that he was running out of ideas, and his recent creations were too eccentric. Bread is part of everyday life, and customers seek comfort more than uniqueness. The president wasn't listening to feedback from retailers, and his products were disappearing from shelves. Holding on to a glimmer of hope, I went home after work and started drafting proposals. I must have thought of nearly 50 ideas. One of them was the traditional European pastry, gâteau noir, a concoction of caramel made with plenty of butter, mixed with walnuts or nuts, sandwiched between firm cookie dough, and baked to perfection. The gâteau noir's cookie dough is thick and prone to breaking, rendering it unsuitable for pastries requiring extended transport and display. I decided to apply the method used for apple crumb cake, adapting it to the gâteau noir's needs. However, just a proposal wasn't enough to fully convey the idea. The best approach was to have someone taste the actual product. So, I made several prototypes at home and had Jennifer taste them. Max, previous prototypes felt disjointed with the bread texture and caramel, but this iteration blends them seamlessly. Gâteau noir, originally a simple pastry found in supermarkets, may evoke nostalgia for certain age groups. The challenge lies in attracting younger generations less familiar with gâteau noir. I believe a packaging design featuring caramel would be effective. Given the popularity of caramel lattes in cafes, the term caramel should attract attention. That's a great idea. Go for it. With President Johnson in a slump, Jennifer hoped I could be the breakthrough. She believed President Johnson would be open to new ideas and encouraged me in my endeavors. President Johnson, dedicated to bread making, might see something in my proposal. I also believed I could make a difference. Being a small to medium enterprise, the distance to the president wasn't too far. Once I had fleshed out my plan, I gathered my courage and went to see him. I aim to participate in product development eventually. While I acknowledge there may be room for improvement, could you please review my proposal and sample this prototype I made at home? I handed over the gâteau noir-inspired pastry along with the proposal documents to President Johnson. Accustomed to making all decisions himself, he looked surprised at the sudden proposal. He had a deep passion for bread making. Even if it wasn't an immediate yes, I believed he would at least be interested. President Johnson, looking solemn, began to go through the proposal. And then President Johnson slowly took a bite of the gâteau noir-style pastry. I waited for his reaction, but he remained silent, tasting it without changing his expression. His eyes twitched slightly, but at that moment, I couldn't understand what it meant. What is this? It's inedible. "This is awful," President Johnson bluntly stated, pushing the proposal documents and the uneaten sample back at me. "Our sales are declining despite my sleepless efforts in product development. If you have time for anything else, focus on field work. Your priority should be expanding our shelf space, even by a millimeter." He pointed towards the window, urging me to go out for sales immediately. Looking outside, I saw a blizzard, the view completely obscured by the swirling snow. It had been snowing since yesterday, and non-essential outings were advised against. "There's a heavy snow warning today, and the weather's too bad to take out a car. The supermarkets on my route might close early too. Crawling on the ground if you have to. That's what sales is about." The president seemed to have no concern for the safety of his employees. I packed the new product documents and the sample bread into my bag and got into the company car. Having missed lunch, I also brought the bag of God-on War-style pastries intended for my colleagues. After such harsh criticism from the president, I won't distribute these to the staff. I'll likely get caught in traffic. I might as well eat them myself. Many people had to drive despite the snow. As expected, the roads were jammed. It seemed like a waste of time to just sit there. I decided to take a back road, hoping to avoid the traffic. There weren't many cars, and I felt confident I could make it to my sales destinations as planned. However, things didn't go as smoothly as I hoped. I should have stayed on the main road. The snow is incredibly hard, maybe due to low moisture. It's not stopping, and at this rate, my car might get stuck. I drove slowly for safety, talking to myself. Then, I saw a line of cars stranded ahead. A few vehicles in front had gotten stuck in the snow, unable to move. I tried to turn around, but unfortunately, there were several cars behind me. I quickly looked for a side road, but there was none. I found myself unable to do anything. An hour passed as I waited for the cars to move. They seemed to be waiting for a tow truck, but the heavy snow must have caused numerous emergency calls, delaying help. Being on a back road in a residential area didn't help either. That's when I realized I hadn't eaten lunch yet. The God-on War-style pastry, which I thought was my best creation, was about to have its moment. I was about to eat the pastry from the plastic bag when I noticed that the engine of the car in front of me was off. The long standstill might have caused her car to run out of gas. This could mean trouble inside the car. The heater might have stopped working. It appeared to be a woman in the driver's seat. She was wearing a thick coat over her head, trying to ward off the cold. The temperature inside the car seemed to be very low. "Are you okay?" I knocked lightly on the car window. A woman in her mid-20s was in the driver's seat. I was taken aback. She was strikingly beautiful, with distinct facial features. As expected, the car's interior was freezing. Her face was pale blue, and she was shivering violently. With trembling hands, she barely managed to open the driver's side door and spoke to me in a weak voice. I was out of gas and unable to use the heater. I had no choice but to drive. I wanted to reach a nearby gas station, but I was stranded here due to traffic. Someone is on their way to pick me up, but they're also stuck in the jam. Out of gas, huh? Looks like the nearby stations are closed today. Please use this blanket for now. Also, if you don't mind, this is a pastry I made yesterday. Please have some. The woman must have been really exhausted. She gratefully accepted the blanket and pastry. I thought it would be impolite to keep looking into a stranger's car for too long. So I returned to my snow-covered vehicle. About 30 minutes later, a tow truck arrived and removed the stuck and broken-down car. The line of cars started moving slowly, but the woman's car didn't. Right, her car had run out of fuel. I had handed her the blanket and pastry, and then forgot about her situation completely. Worried about her, I went back to her car. She was wrapped in the blanket, but her hands were too numb from the cold to grip the steering wheel properly. I quickly suggested, "I can drive you to where your ride is waiting. It's an emergency, so let's leave your car here for now. You can call a tow truck or something later to get it." As I said this, I glanced at the passenger seat and noticed a plastic bag that had contained a pastry neatly folded and placed there. She had finished the pastry I made. I was curious about her thoughts on the taste, but that wasn't a priority now. I led her to my sales car. It's warm. I was so worried about what would happen. "Thank you so much for helping me in this situation." "No, I'm sorry for not being more thoughtful. I've been debating whether it was appropriate to ask a woman I just met to get into my car. That's natural. Besides, this car is used for business, right? Are you working right now? Is it okay for your time? The woman's name is Emily. She's 26 years old, 2 years younger than me. She works in a department related to personnel at her company, doing administrative support work. When I asked Emily where her ride was waiting, it turned out to be in a completely different direction from my sales destination. If I headed straight there, I would make it in time for my sales appointment. However, with this heavy snow, the clients were unlikely to be interested in discussing new products. So, I prioritized taking Emily and called my client to cancel. They understood my situation and agreed to the cancellation without issue. Then I called my company to explain the situation to my colleagues. I thought everything was resolved, but it wasn't. Just as I was about to start the car, my phone rang. It was President Johnson calling. What do you mean by cancellation? Are you kidding me? Which is more important, some stranger or the company? Your priorities are all messed up. President Johnson's loud voice echoed through the phone. He seemed to have no concern for others. Despite employees being stranded in the snow, there was no hint of worry in his voice. There's someone here who can't move their car because of the snow. The car they're waiting for can't reach here, and the heater isn't working. They're in trouble. If I leave them in the cold car, their life could be at risk. How nonchalant. Securing contracts is your responsibility, not worrying about strangers. Spending time on failed bread was a waste. Bread making relies on me. Other employees should simply support my efforts. At that moment, I was fully occupied with responding to the president. I had momentarily forgotten about Emily in the car. If that's the case, I'll contact the store and head there right after I drop you off. But then, President Johnson delivered an unbelievable message. Incompetent and late. You're fired. Fired. After the call ended, I came back to my senses and noticed Emily's concerned gaze. I'm sorry if I caused any trouble. I can walk from here if it's inconvenient. Emily was about to step out into the swirling snow, wrapping her coat around her. I gently grasped her slender arm to stop her and said in a calm voice, "No, it's settled. This situation has clarified things for me. Feeling frustrated by my limitations, I'll resign when I return to the office and begin job hunting tomorrow." I tried to sound cheerful, not to worry her. Then, as if remembering something, Emily asked about the pastry I had given her earlier. "Was that pastry you gave me earlier handmade by you?" It had a flavor like gâteau noir, innovative yet nostalgic. It reminded me of the pastries my grandmother used to buy from a local Western confectionery shop. It was delicious, with a simple and nostalgic taste. Emily's expression brightened as her body temperature seemed to return. I felt incredibly happy but explained the situation calmly. Actually, it was a prototype. I work at a bread manufacturing company and have been striving in sales to engage in product planning. However, it's essentially a one-man operation, with all decisions made by the president. So, my ideas will never materialize. What a waste. I would definitely be a repeat customer. We chatted about trivial things as I drove her to the designated location. There, in the heavy snow, stood a sleek luxury car, quite out of place. It was clear that Emily came from a wealthy family. As we said goodbye, she asked about my workplace. Hesitant, since I was about to be fired, I still told her I was leaving the job today. Then, I made a U-turn and headed back to the company. After getting caught in traffic several times, I finally arrived at the office, only to be called into the president's office and officially dismissed. The reason given was neglect of duty. Returning to my desk, Jennifer whispered to me with a concerned look, "I'm sorry, this is my fault. I irresponsibly suggested you take your proposal to the president. I secretly heard from the secretary that your idea was too good, and that's what caused a problem." "What do you mean?" "He's been in a slump, losing his momentum and becoming irritable. Your innovative idea came at a bad time and seems to have upset him. I shouldn't say this, but have confidence. Your gâteau noir can certainly succeed at another company. I had many things I wanted to do at this company, and thought I had contributed in my own way. There was much I wanted to say, but creating a hit product was the most important. To leverage my experience and skills, I started looking for a job, focusing on other companies in the same industry. I even applied to a rival company, much larger than President Johnson's. Having no real track record in product planning, I had little hope, but to my surprise, I was called for an interview. Dressed in a suit for the first time in a while, I went to the interview venue. Impressed by the magnificent company building, I was looking for the waiting room when a woman approached me. "Excuse me, are you Max? You helped me that time." "Jess, are you talking about that snowy day? Thank goodness I recognized you from your resume photo. I need to discuss something work-related with you. Please follow me." Emily led me away from the interview area. "But I have an interview scheduled." "Don't worry, it's fine. The president is here to see you." Emily guided me confidently, unperturbed by the watchful eyes of rival candidates waiting for their interview turns. Inside, a man in his 50s was waiting for me. "You're the one who made that Gâteau Noir pastry, aren't you?" Emily told me about that day. "Thank you for saving my daughter's life." The man's name was Thompson. He was the president of the company I had been called to interview for. Until then, I hadn't realized he was also Emily's father. It wasn't much. I just did what I could. That Gâteau Noir was criticized by my previous company's president. Being praised by her daughter encouraged me. "Thank you for that." Emily's words had indeed been a driving force in my job search. That pastry was criticized. There's room for improvement, sure, but as a concept, it's good. I would have valued it. President Thompson had tasted my pastry. Emily, moved by its flavor, had saved half in a Ziploc bag and taken it home. That night, while telling her father, who was the president of a bread company, about being stranded in the snow and my help, she had him taste the pastry. I initially wanted my father to taste it simply because it was delicious. However, after overhearing your dismissal over the phone, I felt it would be a waste for such a tasty pastry not to be available. I attempted to reach out to your previous company, but they declined, citing your termination. Then Jennifer reached out, mentioning your interest in product development and potential application here. After finding your application, I informed my father, and he was thrilled. I was stunned by the chain of coincidences when President Thompson said with a strong voice, "That pastry will definitely sell. Would you like to join our company? We'll assign you to product development and get everything ready for you to start improving it right away." And just like that, I was headhunted into a rival company. As promised by President Thompson, work on improving the pastry began. The once abandoned-heavy cookie dough was refined to closely resemble the texture of Gâteau Noir. The reborn pastry, now a commercial product, was prominently displayed in stores and initially favored by older customers for its nostalgic flavor. It was soon discovered by hungry youngsters who hadn't tasted it before. It quickly became a sensation on social media. As a result, it was featured in TV programs, raising its fame and becoming one of the year's hit products. Jennifer, as expected, resigned to pursue her new dreams. Since then, President Johnson continued planning products alone, but without anyone to offer opinions. He struggled to break out of his slump. The company's sales gradually declined, and 3 years later, it was on the brink of bankruptcy. That's when I, hoping to preserve the local bread flavors, approached President Thompson, leading to an acquisition of Johnson's company. "Director Max, please review this," one of my staff members said. There are still cost issues and the production method needs revising. Additionally, the texture isn't quite right. The bread could be firmer." "Yes, I'll make the improvements." Former President Johnson, now a rank-and-file employee in the product development department, continued to dedicate himself to bread making. It was thought he would leave, being under my supervision, but he didn't. For him, it wasn't about the position, but the act of making bread. Initially, he struggled to let go of his pride as a former president and often got upset being advised by younger employees. Our product development department consists of employees from various generations, all contributing ideas and improvements. It seemed he realized that better products are created through collective brainstorming. He hasn't completely overcome his slump, but he's gradually regaining his former brilliance. It won't be long before he's fully back to his old self. And now, I'm busy preparing for my wedding next month. The bride, of course, is Emily. We plan to serve special bread at the reception, prepared by Jennifer. We'll also have authentic Gâteau Noir. Jennifer laughed, saying she's prepared for a month of all-nighters to get everything perfect. I'm not sure if he'll attend, but I plan to invite former President Johnson. My time in sales wasn't filled with good memories, but in a way, I'm grateful to him. If he hadn't sent me out on that snowy day and rejected my prototype, I wouldn't have met Emily.